and welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where two comic book fans and two non-fans talk about controversial or noteworthy comic books. I'm Ryan.
I'm Spooky Sly.
Fucked up Phil.
And I'm Deadly Darryl.
Oh, so I'm,
Ryan. Hi, Ryan.
Ryan. That's scary enough to be me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's time. We're taking a break from Bleach.
Revolting Ryan? Rotting Ryan? There's a lot there.
All those are, but those aren't special for October. That's all the time. So, yeah, it's our special October Halloween extravaganza. For the first time ever, we are not talking about Junji Ito, which is pretty sad.
Yeah.
It feels like for the first time ever, we're not talking about Bleach.
Yes, we've always talked about Bleach. We've never been a Bleach show.
That's what it feels like.
Two Bleach fans, two non-Bleach fans. Talk about comics.
If you guys want us to do more Bleach, we can start doing the anime filler after we finish.
Oh my god.
Okay, but we're not doing that scary stuff.
Okay,
we're doing a different type of scary stuff, right?
This is an idea that Sly has had forever that I've always been really excited for, but we've just never done it. So, Sly, do you want to pitch what we're doing?
Yeah, so we're doing Tales from the Crypt. Now, some of you might know like the '90s TV show. Phil mentioned. He remembers it.
I didn't mention this to you guys when Sly brought it up, but this was one of the first shows I ever watched as a kid, and
Me too.
His home video of me, and I would watch till the Crypt Keeper popped out, and I would run down the hall, and my mom would get a kick out of it. And so every week I would watch this Tales from the Crypt, but I don't remember I was so young when it came out, that I don't remember the episode content that much. But I remember the intro, it is part of my forever consciousness.
I remember his spooky face as well.
I think this is where my love of puns comes from.
Yes. When I was reading these, I'm like, these are like right up Ryan's alley. These fucking puns.
This is a formative thing for us, I guess.
It's like all the Crypt Keeper too. He's primarily the source of puns.
Yes.
He's why I make puns and why my flesh is also rotting off my face, just to be just like him.
I mean, we're all dying, so we're all rotting in a way.
Yeah. You're dying one day at a time. So the Tales from the Crypt series is actually a very loving tribute to a 1950s comic series. Every episode from that show actually was originally a comic storyline. So the original comics were from a company called Entertainment Comics, EC Comics. Nowadays,
you mean DC Comics?
No,
EC Comics.
Oh, okay.
And they were
Fawcett
like Scream
Comics?
no. And we talk a lot about
Comics.
Fuck you.
It was only funny because it one letter and C, and DC and EC rhyme. Fuck you.
Sorry.
We talk a lot about how in the 50s, comics reviewed, basically got to see more outrage that video games and rock music got, where everyone's like, this is moral depravity, let's censor this. And so comics, in desperate attempt to prevent themselves from being censored by the government, start censoring themselves, and that's the reason why the comic industry for the longest time was purely superhero comics, and very even now superhero comics. And the reason why that shift happened was largely because of companies like EC. EC really started pushing other genres. The thing where they're known now, the biggest impact nowadays would probably be Mad Magazine, because that was them too. But they also made horror comics, and near the end of their lifespan, they also started doing medical dramas, school dramas, and stuff like that. So if that scare didn't happen, the cliche that comics are just for kids might not have developed. It might have been more like manga, where you have every possible story could happen in comics, because it's a medium, not like a set thing. But because of that scare, comics became just for kids. You couldn't make superhero stories, and EC after that change happened, they were like fuck comics, and that's why they made Mad Magazine, because they're like, we're just a magazine company from now on and tell these goofy stories from now on.
Yeah, and I remember when comic writers would have to testify in front of Congress about how they were spoiling the minds of the youth or whatever. They would show pictures of EC panels with severed heads and worms eating eyes and stuff, real straight up horror pulp that we would. A lot of non-diehard comic fans think that stuff didn't exist until the late 80s, but it would have. It's the same thing Hollywood had pre-code and post-code. It's that idea of what the medium could have been if it wasn't completely neutered is fascinating to me.
And this stuff is pretty terrifying. I was I'm someone who I don't enjoy horror stuff that much because I don't know, I can't. My mind can't buy a lot of it, so I don't feel the threat of ghosts usually and stuff like that, depending on what kind of horror it is. But these actually creeped me out. I was like, this could they do some supernatural stuff, obviously, but it's like because they put you in the scenario so well, where it's like the horrors you're confronted with, and the ones at least that we read are like plausible enough that you can imagine being in that situation.
It's one of those things where it's like every story is basically real life, but there's like one twist, one difference that makes it like a little bit different. So you buy into it because it's this normal story, but then there's like one thing where it's like, oh, this guy has this thing about him.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really love about this, like between the golden age and silver age of comics, is you see a lot of creators that go on to become these are definitive Daredevil people and stuff like that, but you see them do these radically different different styles. So like this first issue, we're going to be doing Shock Suspense Stories number 6 from September 1952, but the cover is drawn by Wally Wood and colored by Marie Severin, and Wally Wood went on to design the red Daredevil costume. And Marie Severin was a long time Hulk artist. And it's so interesting seeing like them do like more realistic, creepy horror stuff when I know them as like campy Silver Age artists.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this cover shows a KKK gathering, and the story actually is about. We're not doing that story. We may go back to Shock Suspense Stories, but it actually is about KKK gathering, and it's interesting seeing a KKK story in contemporary times, like how they felt about this gang of KKK members running around in the South unchecked, basically
in 1952.
Yeah, and so but. We're focusing on a story that fits more into the mold of Tales from the Crypt. It was actually adapted for a show. It is called Dead Right.
Sly, were all of these that we're going to be covering adapted?
These are all shows.
Okay.
I focus mostly on shows.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
We should watch some of these
I was gonna
episodes for a
say,
Patreon
I was thinking
episode.
about that. I was like, maybe I'll watch these because I enjoyed this so much. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And like, wouldn't this be better with more puns? That's what I always say.
Wouldn't
So
this be better
this-
than more Bleach? That's what I always say.
So this first story is written by Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein and drawn by Jack Kamen and colored by Marie Severin. I don't know who those other guys are, but I mentioned Marie Severin already.
Yes.
And we ready to jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So brace yourself for the shocking final twist to this gripping tale of tension. Dead Right, a crime suspense story. So the story opens in media res with this woman repulsed by this like
Fat,
balding chubby
man
ugly man.
in shorts.
And like
And
It's
the art
not
style,
that-
the art style reminds me a lot of like old style comic books. She looks like Lois Lane.
She
Yes.
does.
Yes.
She
Oh
does
my
so
God,
much.
yes.
She
and
really
I
does.
don't want to like shame this guy, but like this
Too
book is
late.
not nice to this man.
He's ugly. Some people are ugly.
It's not just that, but they like throughout this, like he also smells revolting too. Like people cannot stand how he smells. Dude needs a shower.
Yeah, everything about this guy is really offensive.
Yep.
And she's just like pushing him away like, and he's just like, give me a smooch. And so it cuts to, now it's the flashback because that's, in media res. So she is angrily smoking a cigarette and looking at her favorite fortune teller. What's her name? Lady something?
Lady Varna.
Madame
Lady Varna. Lady Vorna. And
Madame Vorna.
Oh, I'm sorry. Madame Vorna. And
I said
Kathy-
Madame.
Get it right. Get it right. Just
I'm
I think
saying
it's-
Madam.
I think it's Madam.
I like Madame.
I have no idea. I heard both ways.
So she's getting her fortune read. And one thing that I'm not going to read all the narration, but it is very long, but like flowery. And like, I really like the style and the way that this is written. So it's like she sat back and lit a cigarette and the smoke curled up lazily, drifting toward the ceiling of the picturesque tea room, like so on and so forth.
The narration
So, like-
takes just to get this idea out of the way. The narration plays a huge role in all these stories.
And it's
Yes.
it's well written. Mostly.
Yeah, it's very well written.
It's like short prose kind of fiction,
Yeah.
noir kind
Yeah.
of flash fiction.
Yeah. So she's getting her tea leaves read, and Madame Vorna is like, you work for a living. You're an office clerk, but you don't type very well, do you? And she's like, hey, yeah, you know what's going on. And she's like, all your life you have desired to marry well, to marry for money, but your chance has never come, so you keep on working and hoping. But today you will lose your job. And she's like, yeah, right. My boss is out of town. My lunch hour is almost up. I should get back to work, but, the boss isn't there. Who cares? And when she gets back to work, her boss is there.
And
He
the
came
clock
home
was
early.
wrong in the
Yes,
tea
that's-
room.
Yeah, so the reason why she's late, she's late because the clock was slow in Madame Eva's house. So
Madame Ava.
Madame Vorna.
Vorna. I was thinking, I'm doing a Ravenloft reviews. Madame Ava, Madame Ava. I'm sorry. This fortune teller, her house, the clock was bad, so now she gets fired. The waitress gets fired. Not the waitress, sorry.
She's a secretary
woman,
or something.
The secretary gets fired because of the slow clock.
Yeah, and I the thing that I really like about this little thing that we get on like the second page is I'm immediately like, is this lady like, is this fortune teller like a scammer that she's setting people up to have their things? And like I really like that it's immediately like you don't know what's magic and like horrifying, you know, like what's part of the horror elements and what's not.
Yeah, because she could have set up that clock herself to purposely sabotage.
But so the narrator says like she's been right twice before. So it's like part of the setup is like she's like, here's the first 2 times she was right about my fortune. The first time was when she told me I get fired, but you think she couldn't have set it up because she says, "How would I know your boss would be back from town?" Like,
that's why. That's it's like that's what convinces you a little bit more.
Yeah,
like, it is not completely convincing. Like she knew her dad would come back to life or something weird like that. It's like very very plausible series of events.
And especially like in 50s comics, I expect like they're like a fortune teller. I just assume that they're like some magic alien or something.
Yeah. And now the second time she was right.
Yeah, so she's like, you're still out of a job. Your savings are running low. But wait, don't worry. I see a great deal of money in your life someday and a man. And I see a job today. So then she gets her job as a waitress. And she's like, she comes back and she's like, I did get a job. She's like, yes, I see, carrying food. You're a waitress. It's like, you got to tell me more. Tell me more about that dough and that guy. She's like, he will not be rich at the time of your marriage, but he will come into money way later. And she's like, fat chance. I'm not marrying any jerk unless he's loaded. But is it love? And she's like, dodges the question. And she's like, he'll inherit the money from someone near and dear to him soon after you're married. Wait, I see a large man asking you for a date. And then we see this guy at the
guy from the opening page. The
fat smelly man.
Yeah, he's like, how about tomorrow night? Cute stuff. You got anything going on? She's like, no, thanks. I'm busy. And she keeps going back to Madame Vorna.
And she's like, this guy keeps hitting on me. Can you tell me when I'm going to meet my future husband?
Yeah. And I'm so torn on how I feel about the politics of this book, because she's like, they're really, really mean to him, but he's also like really hitting on his waitress at work. And she's like, no, thanks.
Yep.
I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the 50s. I guess everyone just hit on waitresses like it was fair game. Hey, dame, you're just trying to work, but I want a bang.
Yeah, but then she's just like, this guy was a disgusting fat slob. Tell me more about my future husband.
I mean,
and she's like,
there's another story we haven't read that wasn't included in this thing, but like me and Sly have read it, and that was also about like a very rude woman that like just wanted a man.
A lot of these stories, there's like the best way to describe them is dark morality tales. Basically, somebody's like greed or selfishness usually becomes their undoing in some way.
I think everybody's kind of the bad people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But for women, because men are usually violent and stuff like that. Women are usually more
vain,
conniving, I guess, in stereotypical sense.
I just have to say, I find these to be a lot less problematic's not the right word, but like less concerning for me than the like stories from the 60s where it's like all the men are boring regular and the women are conniving and like weak and whatever. Having a story where everyone's bad is fine. Like, I'm okay with this.
Yes. Yeah.
So she's like, your husband will die violently, and that's when the inheritance will happen. And
soon after he inherits the money, he'll die.
Oh yeah, okay.
He gets the money and he'll die. So you have to deal with him after he gets rich. So that's
So she's like, this is the best. I'm gonna be a rich widow.
Yeah, and then she's like, I see the large man again. He's going to ask you for another date. And he's like, come on, baby, give me a break. What night ain't you busy? And she's like, I'm busy every night, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
And then
my favorite thing is as she talks to, it's always like intersplices her dialogue with choke because he's just so nauseating. Yeah. I'm not busy.
Yeah, the Archie choke voice sound effect.
Choke.
Yeah. She's like, please. She goes back to the fortune teller. Please forget that horrible fat crumb. Tell me more about the guy I'll marry. And she's like, I see that you were very rude to this guy. And she's like, he smelled so bad.
And she's like, guess what? He is the man
He
you'll
is the
marry.
one who will inherit the large sum of money soon after you're married. And she's like, oh no.
And it's just to weigh the options, like saying, okay, maybe I'll date him, but he's so smelly. I'll try to endure it until he dies and he'll get rich. Like
She doesn't
just
say
weigh the
that
options.
he's the one that will inherit the money. It's that the initials of the person inheriting the money are CM.
No, that happens later.
okay.
Yes.
First,
we have
she
to,
says,
later.
yeah.
we have to keep it's very important to keep the mystery pacing clear for the audience, because that's
Yeah.
very important to the reveal.
It's also like really good.
Yes.
So then she's like, ugh, she's been right 4 times. I guess she does see, and I'm reading here, the fat Slav dying soon after he inherits all that dough. Violently. Maybe he'll get killed in a car accident. And if I'm married to him. And then finally she's like, fine, I'll go out with you.
She goes like, all right, choke.
Yeah. That's the stuff Darryl was saying. Then they go out to the...
And it's such a mean thing because like they're on a date and it's like they go to a movie together and he's like, it's a good picture, and she's like,
They're dancing and he's like, are you having a good
and then
time?
they dance and he's
she's
like,
They sat together in the dark, Kathy retching with each breath she took. Kathy was sick to
I'm
her
also
stomach all
retching.
night.
Ryan's retching now too.
Yeah, I'm retching just thinking about him. That's when she says, he's like, who? You said it was a lot of dough. He'd inherit how much? She's like, I see his initials. His initials, CM. And she's like, Charles Marno, that's right. How much money? And she's like, $25,000. And this is when I was like, this is the 50s. That would almost pay off my student loans.
Sure, I'll get married to someone that's gonna die to pay off a bit of my student loans.
Yeah. And she's like grilling him. That later it cuts back to there having a lovely walk in the park. And he's like, I don't have much now, but I got good prospects. Will you marry me? And she's like, before I answer, do you have any family that's rich?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, my uncle's got
literally
a factory.
says
He's
that.
worth something, but I wouldn't ask him for anything. And she's like, that's all right. You won't have to ask him. Yes, I'll marry you.
So then they show them together on the beach later, and he's like, yo, smell the fresh air, babe. And she's like, this is the first fresh air I had in days. Oh my God, it feels so good.
He plants his flabby lips upon hers. Kathy thought of chucking the whole deal, but $25,000 boomed in her
25
reeling brain.
G's.
Then she's like, it cuts to them just like lounging around the house, and she's like, have you heard from your uncle, the rich one? He's like, why should I hear from him? He's out west with his family. She's like, family? You didn't tell me you had family. And he's like, what do you care? We're in love.
Yeah. And she goes to, like a month later, she goes to the secretary, please tell me, when's he gonna die? I gotta know. Like, it's driving me crazy living with him.
And she says, it's gonna come. He's gonna inherit the money soon, and then his death. And so then it happened. Kathy stopped at a cafeteria, and as she goes to order coffee, someone yells, "Hold it, lights!" And the lights go off, and they say, "Young lady, you're the 1 millionth customer. And if you'll give us your name," she's like, "Oh, Kathy Marno." And they say, "Well, since you're the millionth customer, you get a $25,000 check." And so she's excited. She comes home, and the husband is like, "Kathy, is that you?" And she goes, "Yes, it's me, you disgusting pig, you fat slob. I won the $25,000. And he starts crying, and she's just yelling at him.
Yeah, he's like, what do you mean? And she's like, the Madame Vorna was wrong. And he's like, I don't know what you're
Get
talking
out of my
about.
way, you filthy, smelly Charlie! Don't even look at me like that. And then
I want to. Thanks for 3 months of perpetual nausea.
and in desperation, he pulls out a knife and says, "If I can't have you, nobody can." And then he murders her, and CM dies, and then he inherits the money.
Yes.
He inherits the money, so the prophecy was right. And then, but he's supposed to die violently after, and we see the grave of Kathy Marno, and a newspaper blows in the wind, landing on the gravestone, and it says, "Charles Marno dies in chair. Convicted murderer was pronounced dead by prison warden."
Yeah. So a relative died, and
Someone
he got the
dear
money,
to him.
And then he died
Someone
violently.
near and dear to him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All works out.
Be careful what you wish for. Am I
Did
right?
anyone see this was coming?
No.
No, I
did
didn't.
not at all either.
I did
What
not.
a lot of times twists like this are either like way too telegraphed or like need a lot of like buy-in.
Yeah.
I thought this was like super good.
It's so smart too because it seeds it to
Yeah,
you too,
it's
where
totally
it's like
plausible.
CM, and this is the entire time Kathy's like, "Oh, it's Charles Marno."
Yeah.
And then she becomes Kathy Marno. I'm like, that's so smart because the best twists are those that you can figure out early if you're paying enough attention or you're guessing.
And this is one of the reasons why I like love old comics, that a lot of people talk a lot about, like, well, new comics, like, they take so much more time and the old ones are so like dialogue heavy and everything, but this story was in 8 pages and it's pretty effective.
It is. And like even the narration, like, again, we're skipping most of it, but it's like as he's killing her, it's like Charlie brought the gleaming knife blade down again and again. Kathy's bag fell to the floor. The $25,000 spilling out, blotting out the blood. It's like that kind of, those little things like add to like the craziness of these scenes. And his face, because it's like 5 panels in a row of it zooming closer and closer on his face as she screams at him and calls him a filthy smell, and he's like, "I love you," and just as the tears start to come out of his eyes, it's just so terrible.
Also, we haven't really specifically talked about the art. I think this art is pretty fantastic.
Yes, I like it.
Like, it's very, it's like it. It's still bright and colorful, but like the faces feel much more detailed than like most like Silver Age superhero comics, and like I feel like it's like you could see how this company became Mad Magazine. Like you could see like the stylized takes and stuff, but a lot of the angles are exciting. You see a lot of emotion in their faces. Like I am really into basically every aspect.
Yeah,
of these books.
I always dislike like early comic coloring, but when you guys were like, this is the colors they had to work with, it's like, oh well. Like,
a lot of times that was just due to limitations in like how expensive it was to print.
Yeah. Whereas I like the drafting and the figures and the people.
I love the gaudy colors though, like, and I think if I remember the show really captured that. They have very neon color palette for a lot of the scenes and stuff. So the show is trying to be very faithful to that aspect of it too.
So we're moving on to Haunt of Fear, number 21.
So Haunt of Fear, just to clarify, Haunt of Fear is what Tales of the Crypt was called before it got name changed.
Oh, okay.
And so the show
cool.
basically merged what were the original 3 narrators, because originally the original series had the Old Witch, the Vault Keeper, and the Crypt Keeper, and each one would tell a different story.
That's cool.
And so the show kind of merged them all into one. The Vault Keeper is the punniest, so he's the most like Ryan. The Old Witch is the ugliest, so she looks the most like the Crypt Keeper.
I thought you were going to say like Ryan.
Like Ryan.
And the Crypt Keeper, like, I couldn't think his name, but he's my favorite out of 3 because all he does is always trash talk the other ones. His stories suck, mine's the best. And usually he's right. I usually prefer his stories the most.
So he is Sly.
Yeah.
So this is October 1953. It's still Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein, Jack Davis, and Maurice Evans still. So there's a lot of in-house storytelling here.
Yes.
There's
awesome.
There's so much alliteration because it always begins and ends with the Crypt Keeper saying something, and he's just like, it's full of alliteration, his stuff. Now that old hack has bored you with her sissy scream scoopings, it's time for a real terror tale. So creep into the crypt of terror crumbs, and your host in howls, the Crypt Keeper, will curdle your blood and shiver your spine with another chiller diller from my moldy collection.
I call this eerie adventure into the nauseating Dig That Cat. He's real gone.
Dig that cat.
That's the name of the story. And it always opens like the last one did.
I think we should bring back crumbs as an insult. I'm such a fan.
That's a good one.
You fat crumb. So this opens with this man, Ulrich the Undying, bowing in front of a crowd as we get to know that he's about to be sealed into a coffin, lowered into the grave, and they're going to bury him for 3 hours, but there's only enough oxygen for 1 hour in there. And he's thinking to himself as he lays down here, and when they dig me up, they'll examine me and pronounce me dead. But I'll live again, return from the dead as I have returned from the dead before. And this is my last farewell performance. The last time I will return. The last time I can return.
Yeah, so this is like the framing device. Basically, it's him in his coffin talking to the audience as he's recounting his life leading up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this premise right away.
So we go back.
It sets up like this guy can come back from the dead, but there's also like a built-in limitation that like this is the final climax no matter which way it goes. And that just like is a lot more interesting than a lot of like what Marvel was doing at the time, for example, like these Tales to Astonish and stuff, where it's just like he's not a superhero, but like that same kind of thing where the twist is like, oh, he can come back from the dead. Like this has a built-in limitation right from the beginning.
There's a rule to it. It's not just
exactly. That's
Stanley always said radiation is like magic in his stories. So if you wanted to have,
oh my god, it is.
Yeah.
So we go back to he starts recounting for us how he got here, and he was basically like a homeless drunk on the street, and a man comes by. With
there's also a lot of alliteration here. He was a drunk in a doorway, a derelict, a down and outer.
Yeah.
And this man says, "You want to be rich, richer than you ever dreamed?" And he's like, "Yeah, here." And he eventually listens to him because he buys him like coffee and sobers him up a little. And he's like, I have learned how to cheat death, not just once, but many times. And he's like, you know how cats have 9 lives? Well, I figured out that there's actually a gland in the cat that if you put it in a human body, you could have those 9 lives.
That's how it works. That's science.
He's a doctor.
And he's like, it's a simple operation. Yep. And he basically is like, I don't know about this, but he eventually consents to it because his life sucks. And
Yes.
trigger warning, there's cat death here, for those of us who are upset by this.
I like that we didn't content warning the husband murdering his wife.
People get upset.
I'm joking about this.
I also do. So
But so the cat's strapped next to him screaming, and he's strapped down. And as he passes out, again, the narration's really great. Like, I remember the sickening smell of the ether, the cat's shrill scream as I slipped into oblivion, and then waking. And so he wakes up, and there's a dead cat next to him. And he's like, how can I be sure this works? And the doctor pulls out a gun and says, this is certain death. And he's like, no, don't kill me.
Yeah, he shoots him through the chest.
Yeah, he shoots him through the heart. He dies and then comes back. And he says, now we'll call you Ulrich the Undying.
And I love that Ulrich is like, but you just used up one of his lives. He's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, he's like, well, we won't waste any more. We have to try it. So he cleans himself up, Ulrich, and he's like, his first spectacle, he said to people, I'm going to jump off Niagara Falls. And everyone's like,
without a
crazy.
barrel.
Yeah, without a barrel. He's crazy. He's going to die. There he goes. He jumps off. He dies. And what's interesting, too, is he comes back, but his bones are all broken. So
I
he still has to
love
wait
this
months.
detail.
Mm-hmm.
This seems so much more well thought out than anything I expected. Is like, he has to spend months in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yes. He's not just like, I'm magically back to normal.
Right.
I just want to know, what kind of healthcare plan does he have that they could keep paying? And because like they're like, you got $30,000 in wages and admissions.
It's people going to see him. It's a spectacle.
Yeah,
people are paying to see this man kill himself.
No, I get that he gets $30,000.
Yeah.
But then like he spends all that time in the hospital.
Oh, like what
And I'm
healthcare
like,
plan does he have that like heals him back? And
It doesn't cost him $30,000.
Yeah, but 30,000 in the 50s again, right?
Yeah, and also I don't know how much it costs for a hospital stay to 50. Maybe like $1 a week or something. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? How much could a banana cost? $20.
And he's like, you are living your third life now. You have used up 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then his next spectacle is to jump from a plane without a parachute at 2,000 feet.
To me, some of these, it's like being buried alive as his final. I'm like, that doesn't, like, jumping out of an airplane is probably one of the craziest ones he can do.
Yeah.
Like, no one's going to be like, wow, I can't believe he survived without oxygen for 3 hours when he falls like 2,000 feet to the ground.
That is fair, but it does create the good family advice where he's in the coffin, like, recounting his life. Right?
Also, people have fallen from planes and lived. Like,
that is
without
true.
parachute.
That is true, yeah.
And it's a crazy, and people don't like, people still like, I don't know how they lived, but it has happened to people. I don't know if anyone's ever gone like 3 hours without oxygen and lived.
Batman. He slows his breathing.
Fuck you.
Oh, that evil Superman from...
Okay, guys, this is not what I'm talking about.
Image comics.
All right. Okay. So he makes $60,000 or $56,000 at this jumping out of the plane thing, and the doctor is like, "All right, here's your 28 grand." And so he's thinking to himself now, I've taken a slug in my chest, I've gone over Niagara Falls, I've leapt from a plane, I've used up 3 of my 9 lives, I suffer the fear and pain, but this doctor who watches takes half the dough. So I made up my mind, and this is fucking terrible. He's driving in the car, and he's like, I'm going to make an investment, Doc.
I love this line so much.
I'm going to invest my 4th life for 100% of our partnership. I'll still have 5 lives left. And he literally just drives off a cliff with the doctor in the car, and as they're hitting the ground, he sees, as the doctor dies, him smiling at Ulrich.
Yeah,
the doctor's smiling. Doctor's smiling at Ulrich. He's like grinning.
Yeah,
creepily
as the doctor goes through the
so
windshield,
good.
he's smiling. And then it says, the doc died instantly, I revived. I was now in my 5th life.
And he's like, I can't forget that smile. I can't get it out of my mind.
Yeah.
So he says, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be tied. Oh, this one is actually the most crazy to survive. He ties himself in a sack and drops into the river for 6 hours with weights. So they pick him. Here's the tough part is that they take him out of the bag and he's dead. And so they send him to the morgue.
Yeah, they're like, this guy died, so he failed.
And so normally, apparently, the doc would take the corpse away and wait for him to revive. But this guy
that's where his bills get paid. The doctor would do the doctor work.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, the thing is, he just killed his insurance plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so now this guy was literally about to embalm him and drain the blood from his body. And so he's thinking in the coffin, that's why the doc smiled as he died. He thought they'd embalm me and I wouldn't be able to come back. So what he does for the next time is he hires an attendant, Saxton, and he says, as soon as I'm declared dead, you have to bring me back here and put me in bed, and then I'll come back. And he's like, all right. So he gets himself
put into an electric chair for one trick, and then he gets killed after that.
On TV and everything. So he makes like $90,000. And as he sits on the bed counting his money, Saxton comes in seeing $90,000 and is like, give me that money. And he starts arguing with him and fighting with him. And he says, like, I struggled with him, which was a mistake because Saxton plunged the knife into my heart.
And wasted my 7th life.
Yeah. And so he says, this is the last time I can die and expect to return. This is my 8th life. When I revive, I'll be in my 9th life.
That's my last life.
Yeah. I'm rich now thanks to that poor cat. That poor cat lying dead on the table next to me. That poor cat that died so I could have its 9...
Oh my lord!
He says, no, the cat, it died once. I only got 8 lives from it. Only 8. No. And he starts sweating. He's like, let me out of here. Let me out of here. And he starts banging on it, screaming, that's why the dog laughed. Ah! And then we see above ground, he's been down there in over an hour, folks. His oxygen is gone by now. And one of the people says, hey, Ed, did you hear a scream? A faint scream? And he says, nah, it must have been a cat you heard, Phil. And then the Crypt Keeper comes to tell us the moral of the story, basically. And that's my Yelp yarn, fiends. Ulrich counted his 9 lives very carefully. Trouble was, he only had 8 to play with. Poor pussy used up 1. When they dug up Ulrich at the end of the 3 hours, he was dead, all right, for good, too. I'm not going to go through all these puns.
Yeah. There's a lot of puns.
But that I thought was fucking great.
So did you guys see that one coming?
I did not.
I knew he was gonna die in that coffin, like that was very clear, but I didn't see the like, oh, that cat's death counted.
Yeah.
That turned logic behind it, like
that one is so great because it makes like complete sense when you get to it. You're like, of course that would happen. It's just that it throws so many like curveballs at you where it's like, because I was like, is the doctor gonna come back alive too? Did he do this thing too?
Yeah.
But then it's like, then the doc died, and then his like partner murders him, and because you have so much info for each of the lives, there's a lot of things you could potentially consider when you're like getting close to the end. But it's just so simple and effective and makes sense, but like it got me when I read it. I was like, whoa.
And I also really love that so many of the lives, not so many, but like there's enough lives that are still dead by happenstance. Like that just sometimes these things happen.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't like he truly didn't make every life count, and I found that to be like such an interesting concept of just like, I had a bunch of money and this guy killed me.
Yeah, especially because he could have just maybe given the money, not gotten stabbed through the heart.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're moving on to Shock Suspense Stories number 9 from March 1953.
Yeah, so we're back to Shock Suspense Stories. I was actually thinking of cutting this one. And Darryl,
until I told Sly, I was like, this was my favorite one that I read.
Now, I like a lot of things from this era, I cannot find who wrote this.
Yes.
But it is penciled by Albert Feldstein and inked and colored by Marie Severin. So maybe he also wrote it. But artists would put their names on stuff, and writers weren't always allowed to do that. So a lot of Golden Age stuff, we don't know who wrote it.
Oh, that's sad. But this one's called Carry On Death, and like with a lot of stories, it opens in media res.
Carrion, like Carrion, not like a carry
like
on.
the birds
on a plane.
Yeah. And this one opens in the middle of the story, and it's, my lips are parched and swollen and cracked. My tongue is dry and searches my mouth for moisture, but finds none. So it's this guy laying down in the middle of like a desert, and he's yelling at these vultures. He's saying, "Come on, you lousy vultures! Come down here and feast! Come down here and set me free!"
And that's when I was like, damn, this guy's like, somebody kill me at the start of the story. I'm like, that's interesting.
So that cuts back to the beginning. It's like, I'm trying to remember how it all began, and it's this guy. He's a bank robber that is...
Wait, guys. I'm sorry. I gave the credits for the cover. This is Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein again, and Reed Crandall did the art. So it's the same writers as before, different artist.
Cool. Okay.
This guy's good.
So this guy's this bank robber is trying to drive away from these cops. He has $30,000 in like a black satchel next to him, and
there's one cop.
He held up a bank and murdered a guard, so he can't really get stopped now. Yeah. So there's one cop on a motorcycle chasing after him,
right behind him, and he's like pretty close.
Yeah.
You'll never get me, copper. I'll kill you first.
And he's planning to slam on the brakes as the cop is going like behind him. And
this
as
is
he
the
does,
most narration-heavy story, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
it's all like from his perspective as he's driving the accelerator, trying to trap this cop, and have him slam, like brake at the right time to make the cop slam into his backside.
Yep. So the cop slams into the car, and then you get like the narration, but the sound of metal crashing against metal and the dull thud of flesh and bone splashing against steel never came. My car swerved, skidding onto the gravel shoulder of the road, and everything started whirling crazily as it spun over. So he crashes his car.
I love how much detail they give. The sound of metal crashing against metal, the dull thud of flesh and bones flashing against steel never came. Like they're so gruesomely detailing something that doesn't happen.
It's because that helps build atmosphere. Where you get, this
I like
nauseating. Yeah.
I thought that's also a great touch too, because so many stories like that's a trick that works. But if you've ever been in a car that's going fast and you try to hit the brakes really fast, you always just spin around. Like cars swerve when you're going that fast. And so like the fact that he's like, this is my plan to kill the cop, and he just like flies off the road. You see him crashing through the windshield.
The next time he wakes up, he's next to the cop. The cop is on his motorcycle. He's radioing in that he's like, yeah, I got him. He's out cold. Wrapped up his car, but I pulled him out before I caught fire. And the cop is handcuffed to the guy that's on the ground, the criminal.
And he tells him, hey, come, I'll wait here for you. Here's where we are.
Yeah,
on the
Route
over to the
209.
radio to the other cops. Basically, he's telling his location to the other cops while he thinks the guy's still knocked out cold, handcuffed next to him.
And you're not mentioning the most tragic thing of all. All the money has been burned.
Oh, yeah, in the car, yeah.
And he points out, oh, by the way, bring the master cuff key. I haven't got mine.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he grabs him. The criminal grabs the cop. He throws him on the ground, rolls over on top of him, straddles him. As his free hand went for his gun, and I kicked. It clattered across the concrete onto the gravel shoulder. The eyes bulged and the face turned red, then purple. And I held on. And then his body went limp.
And he's just strangling him.
Yeah, it's fucking terrible, because the guy too was like, I pulled him out of the fire to save him, and then he's like, I'm not going, because he's like, I killed the guard.
You're
already.
not taking me alive.
Yeah.
He piece of shit, like, very clearly.
Yeah.
Hot take from the Divisive Issues boys: guys that murder guards, steal money, and then murder people are bad.
Yeah. So then this guy's like, oh shit, he doesn't have the master cuff key. And so he has to pick him up and basically run into the desert because the other cops are coming.
Right. And he has like he's holding the dead trooper on his back.
Yeah.
And just like Darryl said, he's running to try to get away before they show up.
There's like a rock outcrop coming, like in the distance, that he's gonna try to run and get to before the cops get there.
Yep. And so he gets over there and he like drops down. The narration plays a big part in this because as it goes on, you can tell this guy being in this desert, like handcuffed to this dead body, is a very like brutal like scenario to be stuck with.
Yeah.
Where it's like the body I carried felt as though it weighed 500 pounds. My legs were numb and my clothes were soaked in perspiration.
Yeah. The narration throughout the whole thing is really important to get the feel of like what it's like for him.
Yeah, and he's like, I got a knife in my pocket. It's the only way I gotta get free of him. And then he reaches his pocket. He's like, oh, the dirty fucker. He must have cleaned me out while I was unconscious. And they even, I'm embellishing it a little, but it says like the dirty, and then it's like @ $XX. And even that kind of thing, like they didn't do that a lot in ye olden days of like even censored curses.
Mm-hmm. So he looks back, and it wasn't the police that were arriving. It was just a woman that had driven onto the side of the road to investigate. But he's like, all right, I'm going to take this break, and I'm going to still run ahead out into the desert, just looking for like safety away from the cops.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so for the first night, he just keeps going. He says, I didn't sleep that first night. I carried the corpse. I kept stumbling and moving on. They'll never find me. And he's ranting to himself like, the bloodhounds, they have nothing to smell because my car burned. So if I just keep going, they can't catch me.
It's the thing. It's like what Phil enjoys about like a lot of these stories is it's giving you explanations for why these things haven't happened yet.
That's that I like that so much in this, where I'm like, this is such a plausible thing. Like this is like this scenario could happen.
And also, I think that these books, more than a lot of old comics I've read, balance the art versus narration information, because like a lot of times the narration would be like, this is what's happening in this panel, which is unnecessary. Like the art is also telling the story. So they'll have the narration will serve a function of describing things that you can't see, like, you know, things that are like off panel or things that are internal, but the stuff that's actually happening in the panel is either described through dialogue or just shown artistically. We don't need to be spelled everything out here.
And so he gets to a point where he's like, I gotta get this guy off of me. And so he reaches over and finds the cop's badge, and he's like, I'll sharpen it on a rock. And then he'll try and sever the hand with using the badge itself.
Even now he says, like, the corpse now growing rigid with rigor mortis. Like, he can't, like, he can't carry him. Like,
Yeah, and he thinks back,
He giggles when he rips the badge because he's like, yes, this is my chance. Like,
yeah. But then he thinks back to when like he was a kid and went to the stockyards to a slaughterhouse and watched him slaughter a lamb and skin it, and it made him sick. And he got sick again, just like that time, looking at like the cops.
He says, in his narration, as the sharpened badge slit the white flesh, revealing the red slimy muscles and tendons, I got sick again, just like the time so long ago.
Yep.
So he can't finish this brutal job of cutting off a hand using just a fucking badge.
Which I think is so normal. Like most people would not be able to just do that.
Yeah, and that's such a neat like divide, because this guy's a murderer. He's murdered multiple people, but there's such a difference between like killing someone
with a
in
gun,
like the moment, or with a gun, such a non-personal way to do it, and like now he has to sit there and chip away, and he just can't do it, and it makes him sick. And like that's so interesting.
I think he probably still would have done it because he needed to, but in his sickness, he drops the badge. And it falls into a crevice.
Yeah.
Yep. And so he can't reach it, and then he notices some buzzards flying overhead.
And he also mentions that while he was retching, it emptied his guts of the last drop of liquid left inside them.
Yeah. So then there's all these vultures flying overhead, and then they start dropping down to feast upon the body. And he's like, he's too tired. He can't go any further. My wrist bled where the handcuffs had torn my flesh. My lips were dry. Everything started spinning. I slipped to the ground, and the vultures just start eating the corpse that's next to him.
Well, not even right away. What happens first is he
falls asleep.
He gets somewhere, like he's dragging them while the birds are following them for like a pretty long time.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I gotta stay awake. They'll eat me. And then he falls asleep, and he wakes up, and they're eating at the corpse. And that's
scares
when
them away.
He scares them away, and he's just trying desperately to stay awake.
So now he has this like partially eaten cop corpse, and he's like just dragging it. He's not even like, he's just like, I gotta find a cabin with a knife. I'll die if I don't get free of him. And he starts to think, hey, if I could, my one chance might be if the buzzards eat him, because they'll only eat dead flesh, they can free me. And so now we get back to our opening panel where he's laying and saying, free me. And you're like, oh, it's not kill me. It's eat this guy.
And it's smart, too, because in the opening panel, his hand's off screen, off panel, so you don't see the handcuff next to him to see that. Yeah, so as he's laying down, it's like, I do not move, I do not dare, I don't want to scare them off again. I close my eyes, listening to the beating of wings as the others come down. I listen to them tearing and squealing and fighting amongst themselves as they gorge upon the dead flesh. And then he waits and listens to the sound some more. And then when he looks down, the birds are on him. And you get this panel of his face looking at this bird, and then just his open rib cage and all of his guts as the birds are feasting upon them.
Oh my god, this scene. And it says the corpse beside me is practically stripped clean, but I feel no nausea. I feel no revulsion. Not even when I see the hulking shadow on my own chest tearing and ripping and squealing. And I feel no pain as the vice-like jaws of the raw-necked vultures close upon my flesh and peel it from my bones. I cannot move. I cannot stop them. I can only watch in silent horror as they feed upon me. I can only watch until one of them plucks my eyeballs from my skull, for I am dead.
The end.
Oh, it's so good.
This literally like gave me chills. These 4 panels.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like when I used to play like old games that like adventure games which would kill you actually. Until you're dead.
Yes.
I used to not be able to like look at it. Like as a kid, I would get scared of. It's funny again. I'm like, I don't like horror movies and TV and stuff, but games that would show me dead, like freaked me out in
brutal
so
ways.
bad.
Yeah.
I would like run away from the screen when I was a kid, and this just brought me back there. Just having you at like
that's a really good point. I was getting those feelings with it. Like I told Sly I didn't want him to cut this. This was the only story that when I got to that panel of him being eaten, I was like, oh, like I audibly made that noise as I was reading it.
The thing about a lot of horror like movies, like we off panel we talked about like the Friday the 13th series and like those franchises that go on for endless sequels, and all you want to see is people just dying all the time. The fear isn't like how people die. Like you want to see the killer win. A lot of times the audience wants to see the killer win.
Yeah,
There's not a lot-
but
lot
that's
of
what the franchises like become.
Yeah, so you don't. So there's not enough horror per on the death methods themselves. Like the horror behind the victims. It's all about how cool it is. The guy gets his head cut off. It's so gory. But like in those horror games, horror video games especially, they go back to that old kind of horror where it's about like, I don't want to die this horrific way.
And you're so much in their shoes. Like this guy, as much as he's a piece of shit, he's your eyes throughout this. Like you follow him, so you kind of. He's like your vehicle, and then when you look down, you're like, "That's me! I'm being eaten." Like,
and that's the thing that I think impresses me the most about these is it's the pacing and the way they dole out information. Because like this is 7 pages.
Yes,
that's
really?
so
7 pages.
God.
Yeah, that's
it felt
so
like a whole
nice.
story.
This is what I was talking about. I talk about. I like old comics, like telling
Getting your bang for your buck. Right?
Yes, like imagine getting 3 stories out of one comic book, and they're like this. Like, come on.
And what is it, like 12 cents or whatever?
Yeah.
As opposed to Heroes in Crisis or something, which is like 90 pages of like 5 words of nothing.
This was 10 cents, and you would get 3 stories like this. And like the pacing is the thing that stands out to me the most. Like I don't have nearly as much horror experience as any of you guys because like I don't watch horror movies. I don't really play a lot of games. But I just went to a screening of Alien for the 40th anniversary, and like I love Alien. I've seen it before, but like just the pacing, like I feel like we used to have a lot more, and I feel like we're starting to see that more with a lot of more modern horror movies. Like it's starting to come back, but like I think Sly, that's a really good point about like how it's more like now it's like we got to see the cool kills, where like it used to be like you could just draw it out in a way that works so well. And even though this is so short and it's only 7 pages, it's still paced really, really well. The way they dole out information, the way they dole out the emotions leading up to the end.
I feel like a big part of it is combining dread and tension together, which is what always makes horror movies the best, is that you don't want to see the bad thing that's coming.
Yeah.
Did you guys see this coming, this twist?
I did, but
I think this one was the one that I saw coming the most.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not sure I thought about him being dead at the end. Like with a lot of these, I was so invested in like the journey, I couldn't think about like where's this gonna end up.
That's how I was doing too. As I was reading it, I wasn't like, oh, how's this gonna end? That would be bad. Plus, I was also like, maybe you could always have the thing like a dead body getting up or something, like that kind of like cheesy stuff. I didn't see the birds going after him instead.
What was it? Darryl off panel, he talked about this. He compared it to this whole entire series to a magic trick, where the whole thing is to like in a magic trick, you're trying to distract the viewer while making him not see what's directly in front of them. Like if you were to stop and just think about it logically, that's what I did when the story first opened up. Because I heard this premise from the show. Because he'll say like the show episode, this is their favorite episode of the series. And I heard the premise, I just thought immediately, what could happen when you're in the desert strapped to body? So so when you stop and think about it, you can figure it out. But when you're reading the story and you're engaged in what the writer is doing with the character running to the desert, becoming desperate, it really blinds you from what's the only logical solution that can happen.
Yeah. That's why it's not like who could figure this out type thing. It's like this totally makes sense, but I just wasn't. I was on this guy's trip to try to survive type thing, where like I couldn't think ahead because I'm just like, how do I get out of this situation? You know?
Yep.
Yeah. So now we're going to my favorite story.
This one's great, dude. They're all really good.
Yeah. So this is Tales from the Crypt, number 21. One of my favorite colors, by the way, it shows a fucking zombie perfectly. His head is silhouetted against the fucking moon. It's fucking great.
Caved in and
And so the first story you read was Dead Right, and this story is called Dead Right as well.
That's why I'm having a much harder time finding the credit for this.
Yeah. So in the show, they changed this episode. They changed the name of this one to Abracadaver. So it opens up with the Crypt Keeper saying, back for more fiendish fans, and he's telling the reader, let me introduce you to our narrator for this story, Joseph Fairbanks. And he's this older fellow. Joseph Fairbanks, wait.
It's Dr. Winston.
Yeah, Dr. Winston. So Dr. Winston talks about how him and Joseph Fairbanks are these two older gentlemen, and they'll talk about basically they'll be
like lifelong friends. They've been friends since med school.
They're lovers, right?
Yeah.
No.
I wonder because they said that they
shared everything together.
They said neither of us had married, and consequently, we'd sought each other's company more and more to fill the loneliness of bachelor life. Like,
come on.
Maybe not.
I just saw them as good friends. That were like, let's grow up together.
Yeah, right.
I hate the idea that if two men are very close to each other, they have to be gay. I really hate that.
Okay,
mentality.
well, the thing is, when they say we use each other's company to fill the loneliness left by of not
You can
being
do that
married,
with
I
a
don't-
friend.
Yeah, you can do it with a friend. Like,
Okay,
like I really hate that. Ben and Robin are gay. Sherlock Holmes and Watson are gay. Everyone is close as a friendship. They
No,
must be
I don't
gay.
think that about those guys. I think
You
that's just about
can't. You
these
can't
guys.
like a man without wanting to suck his dick. Like that's how it works. Like that's how it has to work.
So
right?
I found it. So this
that's a
was
good point.
originally published in Tales from the Crypt 37, which I don't have a date on here, but sometime in the 50s, I'm sure. And it's still Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein, probably gay lovers, I assume. Penciled by Jack Davis, and the colors are Marie Severin again. So
I mean, why would they work
obviously-
so closely together if not, right?
yeah,
That's clearly. But so basically, they were like retired like doctors. This reminded me a lot of me and Ryan because
That's why
That's
Sly
why you're
is
fighting
so
it.
angry
Okay.
at it, because he's like, how dare you? I have no romantic feelings for you at all.
And that's why Ryan's like, definitely
Ryan, I'm spurning Ryan. Ryan's like, I thought we had something together.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
So
fuck
yeah,
you,
they're
Ryan.
these old friends that just get together just to argue semantics for no,
No, but
reason.
but it's exactly like us. They have to get a massive fight every time, and then after that they can calm down and have to talk about fun stuff that they usually talk about.
Yeah.
So what happens is they always basically the other doctor, Joseph Fairbanks, he has this theory that when you
the
die,
Sly in this relationship.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a theory that when you die, you don't fully die. Basically, your mind's still alive in some respects. So you basically you're alive while they carry your dead body into a coffin, bury it.
The way they say it scientifically, because they're trying to talk about the science of it, and he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, cells die, but what if your brain essentially went into a state of shock, and so the metabolism just reduced very quickly, so that you'd have maybe hours or maybe days.
What little oxygen left was able to like prolong the life of the brain cells for hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
So
he's
it's like-
saying the
and, like-
body it can't move, it can't talk, it can't do anything. So if it has the amount of oxygen that would allow you to do those things for 10 minutes, then why wouldn't it work just for the brain for hours?
This is why I would argue I'm the narrator, the Carl of our relationship, because Carl basically says, "You're fucking stupid, Joseph. This is dumb. Your theory's dumb. You're dumb." And
And the whole time I'm just like, but what if?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I said this theory. I'm trying to be nice, and I'm just like, "Fuck you." And basically, so
It reminds me of all the times that Sly called my theories sheer poppycock, as he says
Yeah.
on page 2.
and Carl's basically like, "I'm leaving." Like me, I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
leaving." If this
I shall
conversation-
leave this minute if you persist in continuing this ghoulish conversation.
I will quit this podcast right now, he says.
Yeah.
But he goes through a lot of this, Joseph, saying like, imagine what this would be like as someone closes your eyes or puts pennies on it and you can still see, and then you feel your blood being pumped from your body as they're putting embalming fluid in. Imagine being at your ceremony as they nailed the coffin shut, and he's like, stop saying this, and he's like, just think about yourself being lowered into the ground with dirt shoveled on top of you as you're still conscious, and then only then actually dying. And he's like, that's when he's like, I'm fucking leaving because this is just terrible.
Yeah, so basically, Carl, the narrator, he's like thinking about how to counter this dumb argument, saying, "I know it. Just like this is like me too. I'm like, I know I'll see it right next time. I'll fucking get that piece of shit. I got the argument from right here."
Yeah, the drugstore just called. He's running out of you. You know,
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly that. And but then when he goes to Joseph, Joseph doesn't open the conversation for the first time. He starts talking about other stuff, and he's
He
like,
doesn't just talk about other stuff. He's like, I'm bankrupt. I need a bunch of
No,
money.
it says in the narration he first said other stuff.
Yeah, and
Oh, okay,
he's so not paying attention that Carl, the narrator, is taken aback when he says, "Wait, what? You're so focused on waiting for that argument that he gets blindsided. He says, "Wait, you're bankrupt?" and so just says, "Yes, I need money, a great deal of money."
No, but first the friend is like, I'll gladly lend you whatever you need.
And he's like, "Lend? Carl, don't be silly. I'm taking it. Your whole fortune. You see, I've poisoned your brandy." And so he's explaining as Carl starts dying. "Don't bother taking any emetics, Carl. The poison is a fast-acting one. You'll be dead in a moment."
And he gets up and he's like, how could you? And he falls to the ground.
And his body's all like twisted. And
Yeah.
Raggedy. And this is when I talk about the art. This artist goes on to do a lot of Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
First of all, it's very caricaturized. Like, these aren't just like we talk about how the first artists had like Lois Lane. Look like the female look like Lois Lane. This looks very atypical for old school Superman.
Yes.
Asgard.
Yeah.
They look very distinguished, the characters.
It actually reminds me a lot of the art that we saw in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina that we covered a couple years ago.
And when he collapses, he's like a rag doll. Like, it is very
Yeah.
organic. It is not like stiff at all in the old comic sense.
Yeah.
So then, so you're gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, he goes over to him and specifically feels his pulse, and he's like, "No pulse, you're dead, Carl, stone dead." But the narrator is this whole time thinking, I can feel him lift my hand. How could I be dead? I can see, I can feel, I can hear Joseph on the telephone, and he's on the phone calling the funeral director, saying, "Hey, you got to get over here. Dr. Carl Winston just died at my house with a heart attack."
And he says, like, I'm a physician. I'll sign the death certificate. Death by natural causes. No one would question a surgeon's word. The Undertaker is here.
And he says, too, he says in front of Carl's body, "Poor Carl, how I used to argue about silly theories that I didn't even believe myself. But I could never get you angry enough, could I, Carl? I could never get you so upset you dropped dead. No, I had to poison you to get your money." And he's saying all this, and he's like, "Oh, Lord," he's saying to me, thinking I can't hear, thinking, like, knowing I'm dead.
Yeah, so Carl's thinking that as the funeral director comes, and then Joseph starts acting like so remorseful, saying, "Oh, he's dead, I can't believe it. We were getting to an argument, and I must have tested his heart too much, now he's dead." And so then...
I'm his only family. We'll have a small, dignified funeral tomorrow.
Yeah, so the director says, "Sure, why waste time? I got a wick in the truck. Come on and help me." So the two of them put him in a coffin. And as Carl's saying, "You who are reading the story, how can you understand how I felt? How can you know the horror that crept up my rigid spine? I was dead by all standards, and yet I could feel, could hear, could see things move as they lifted me and placed me into the wicker. I could see them looking down at me, but I couldn't blink, couldn't move an eyelid, couldn't live ever again."
And
so
like, look at his eyes. Yeah, almost like he's seeing us, huh?
yeah.
And I love this. They're putting the coffin in the hearse, and the friend is like, "Easy now," and the Undertaker's like, "He can't feel the bumps. Fuck him."
Yeah. So we all get so we get his narration describing sensation. I could feel them get in the front, hear the engine start, feel the motion of riding into town towards the funeral parlor. I could hear the back doors open again. I could feel the wicker being lifted and carried into the cold white room. I could smell the perfume that tried to hide the formaldehyde odor. And so they put him on...
and for some reason, the Undertaker, and when they put him on the table, he's like, "You want to watch?" And he's like, "Sure."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they drain his blood, the needle goes in.
Yeah, and the Undertaker explains it to the doctor, saying, "This is how I drain the blood. This is how I put bottom forward." And Joseph, the friend, is like, "That's interesting."
And even though this is a weird touch, like, it might seem weird, I like it, as it makes so much more sense why this guy is explaining this out loud to us, the narrator. I mean, to us, the audience. When there's like a guy there who's like, "I would like to know about this," and I think I would do this if somebody was like, "You want to see Sly's autopsy?" I'd be like, "Yeah, okay."
Especially if you're a medical professional, maybe. Like if you
exactly
dealt with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, having him be a surgeon, like it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it makes a lot more sense than usual. Where he's like, "I'll just loudly exposit what I'm doing."
Yeah, and so the funeral Undertaker says, "I'll see about a coffin." The friend says, "Not too expensive now." And so the narrator says, "Joseph didn't want to see his money wasted. Not too expensive. I want to scream, but how could I? Dead men don't scream. Though he lies stiffly, listening, feeling, and crying inside."
Yeah.
So then they lift him,
That's why Sly's like, "This is me."
and they lift him into the coffin.
Yep. And so the next day, he says, "I don't know how long I've been in there. Time is immeasurable when you're dead." But they nailed the coffin, and then we have the ceremony of the funeral. And he says,
You could hear the funeral oration. You could hear the pastor speaking, saying, "And so in parting, may I add, Carl Winston lived. He died, but his memory, his work lives after him."
A motor, the coolness of open air. I was being lowered into the grave. The voice, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The hollow boom of dirt crashing down upon the coffin lid. The horror, the screaming, silent horror of it. And now the shoveling has stopped. There is laughter and voices. "That's enough," says the Undertaker. And then Joseph says, "All right, open it up. Carl, are you convinced? Are you?" And the Undertaker says, "Open his eyes." A finger touches my eyes. The night stars twinkle down at me. Joseph's face cuts across them. "You're paralyzed, Carl. You're not really dead. It's a new type of anesthetic. I put it into your brandy." Joseph grins at me. The Undertaker's beside him. "We staged this, Carl. Ben and I together. You're in the garden out back of my house. It isn't morning yet. The drug will be wearing off soon. We didn't even go to the funeral parlor. I just drove you around. Then we brought you back to the house, into my office. I lent some pumps for sound effects. It's all a gag. I wanted to show you that my theory could be right, and you almost believed it. Didn't you, Carl? Didn't you?"
Fucking roasted.
And the Undertaker says, "Doc, it's 5:30. Shouldn't he be coming out of it? It's morning now. The stars have gone, and this is the narrator. And I feel the sun in my face. Joseph is pleading with me, tears in his eyes. Ben Norton's face just gets paler and paler. Carl, for God's sake, Carl, come out of it. It's a gag, Carl. Please come out. His eyes are bulging out of his face. He's sweating. And the Undertaker says, oh, Lord, help us. And the narration ends with, poor Joseph and his theory. He wanted so much for me to accept it. And now I have accepted it. Only he won't know he's right. Not until he goes through what I've gone through. For I am dead. I died of a heart attack just before the Undertaker came. And actually reading through it, if you go back, there's a spot where he says, I got an excruciating pain in my chest. I didn't get that the first time. But he actually had, like, what's so crazy is you go through this roller coaster where you're like, he wasn't dead, that's how he can feel. And then it's like, no, he died a long time ago and has...
Yeah, it's not that he just died. It's that he's been dead the whole time.
Yeah, and then it ends with the Crypt Keeper saying, heh, next time you meet a corpse case, be careful what you say. You might hurt his feelings, heh.
This one was so great because it's something that you can't know if that happens to people.
Well, like with a lot of these stories, you could just go with the cliche, like, oh, a zombie comes out and kills you. Yeah. But this one is more like something that could theoretically happen, like you're paralyzed, forced to go to your funeral and stuff like that.
Yeah, this made me terrified.
I like the story, but for me, it's like this one was when the guy was describing to him, it was like, hey, here's all the things you could hear if you were died, but like you were still conscious. And then it kind of went through it. It was one of those where the other ones, like the desert one, I was like, I have no idea where this is going. How's he going to get like his body off of him? Where this one, I was like waiting to see at the end of it, like when he was being buried and stuff. It's like, all right, so what has it got for me here?
See, that's actually what I liked about it, because like the whole theme of it is being paralyzed and having to go through all these things. He knew what was going to happen. Like, he was sitting there just a complete observer and victim to his own circumstance. And like, I felt that dread of, I'm glad I knew what was coming, because that's what made it scary. And like, I felt like it was different in tone from the other twists. And that's why I enjoyed it.
For me, what I thought was the best, or what made me so distraught after, was like the fact that you think he's dead the whole time, so you're like, you kind of accept it. You're like, this sucks, he died. Yes. But then when they're like, actually, he's not dead, and you're like, that's like,
they give you a brief, like, I was in the same boat as Darryl. I'm like, where could this go? Like, he's dead. Like, where could the story go? How could he get revenge? How could anything happen? Then you get like, I was like, yeah, you get a brief sigh of relief. You're like, no, he's dead. Sorry. That double
He's
punch.
not supposed to be dead, but he is, actually. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So that's our Halloween special.
Yeah.
Hope we've spooked you a bit this Halloween.
I'm feeling spooked.
I'm really spooked right now. I hope this doesn't... I don't know, man.
Hope this is real.
Oh my god, what if all the dead people in history went through this?
What if you never die? What if you just lay there forever? For all time? Well, even as a skeleton, you're like, I can see this.
I guess it could happen.
Anything's possible. No one knows what happens after death.
That's why the Egyptians had those cool ass like tombs. You know, we had like all those rooms and stuff.
Cool
yeah, so at least
tombs.
you're like, this place is rad to hang out in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drink my cat's fluids. Didn't they get buried with their cats?
Yeah.
Content
warning, cat death.
Yeah,
anyway.
they got a lot of them did. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we said all our favorites and why. So I don't think we have to go through it again.
Yeah, I mean, I like them all a lot.
Yeah, I actually think the last one's my favorite. I do, because me and my crazy fear of death, like crazy me. But I like this hit like it struck me in a way that just like upset me.
I also picked that because I knew specifically it's the kind of thing that filled with fear.
When I was reading it, I'm like, this is definitely Tingling Phil's thanatophobia.
and that's why I consider Carry On Death, because I figured it might be something Darryl like, but then I'm like, maybe he won't. But then
I like things where people are trapped in like a hellish situation, and you're like, how would I survive if I was in this?
That's why you wanted to live with us in college, right?
Yeah.
I really like the twist in the first one the most. I felt like the first one was the most clever for me, where it was like setting up this guy's death, and like I do like how many times she called him a crumb. That's also good.
Wow,
It was
really
also
getting
way
the
less
important
like
part.
gruesome besides him
Yeah.
stabbing her to death, but they don't show anything
Yeah.
violent per se.
They were all so good though. Like I liked how diverse they all were, and like this was because these all came out within like a year or two of each other, and like it really shows the diversity that EC was putting out, even in their specific genres. Like these are so much more different than like you could take 60 Superman issues from the same time, and they're all so the same.
Yes. These were all really different and really cool in their own way.
So, do we have any other thoughts?
I'm creeped.
Spooked.
I'm damn, creeped and spooked are the two big ones. What else?
You're
do
too
you-
spooked to even say anything.
Yeah, you're right. So, if you guys want more Halloween content, Stranger Still over at the Flying Machine Network always does a full October month. So this month they've done Voodoo, haunted horror film sets, body farms, satanic panic, and a big finale that will come out on the 30th. So you should check that out and get lots of spooked also, like us.
Mm.
And also, this is not scary. I guess it might be scary if you find my emotions scary, but I also have a new blog post up. And
I love you, Ryan.
I knew it. My theory is true.
I have a new blog post up. I wrote on go to flyingmachine.network/blog and read my new thing about Angels and Airwaves' first album, and about how sad I was as a teenager. That's scary.
Where are you?
Yeah, that's true. And on the Patreon version, you could hear a recording of my band when I was 14. It's not
Cool. That's a good bonus.
Yeah.
That's worth paying money for.
good. Yeah. So, yeah, go to patreon.com/flyingmachine and back us there, too. So, we'll be back in 2 weeks for Bleach, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Gotta go. It's good. It's thematic because we're actually going to basically hell in Bleach. So
We're basically we're like that guy being forced to endure his entire funeral. And we have no way to stop it. Now we have to sit there.
you're being buried alive, and I'm flipping the pages in front of your eyes. You might as well read it.
Also, if you want to talk to us about some of your favorite horror stuff, or apparently more people in our Discord want to talk to us about Bleach than any other episode we've ever done. So, go up the Discord. The links are in the show notes. And so go there and talk to us about this stuff. But anyway, thank you for getting spooked with us at Divisive Issues. I've been a fat, disgusting, slob, smelly crumb of a man.
I've been dead right twice.
I've been Sly's very close bachelor friend.
And I've been Madame Choke Darryl.
Stay in continuity.
Ooh.
Oh,
Spoopy.
I'm glad I died. Oh no, I'm sitting here and I'm dead, but my headphones are still on, so I just have to listen to all your puns.